Hey, what's going on, everyone? Okay, so I'm going to have a guest today, my good friend Dave Murphy. Um, we tried to do a live on here like 2 weeks ago, but we had some technical difficulties, and then we did it on Instagram, and it actually went through, and then I freaking didn't save it correctly. I think Instagram might have changed their settings somehow because I remember um, you just end the call and then it would kind of save it automatically, but it didn't save, so I lost it. So we're going to try third time's the charm. And this is actually our fourth time getting together. We did a podcast a long while back kind of debunking some quote unquote science-based influencers on glyphosate and pesticides used in your food. So we'll wait a little bit. I don't have my trusted coffee with me today, and we'll begin once he kind of jumps in here. So hello. If you guys have any questions in the meantime, happy to try to answer them. And we'll go from there. Let me see here. All right. Raul, let me know if I got your name correctly. Correct. Give me one sec. Trying to invite Dave here. All right, the invite was sent. Let's see. What up, Lisa? We have a guest today. I'm just maybe having technical difficulties again. This kind of happened 2 weeks ago. What up, Dave? Give me one sec, man. Guest request add. Nick, what's going on, man? Hope all is well. Hey, Dave, what up, man? Good to see you.
Not much. How you doing?
Good. You got the trusted glasses again today.
I've been meaning to glasses on. It's this thing is so bright. I probably should take them off, but
no, keep them on, man. They're super cool. I actually wanted to buy a pair to wear them as well, but I've been kind of lazy. I know Paul Check had I think the owner, I forgot his name, on his podcast a long while back, and I've been meaning to buy them.
No.
But I'm like the government, man. It takes me a long time to implement new changes, so I put it on the list, but it's still pending.
Well, you could work for the government if that's the case. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but, it might be a better match,
Yeah, I can take them off for a second. Yeah, it might be easier. No, it's just really bright with that camera. So,
no, Dave, put them back on. They're super cool. I actually wanted to. I'm just saying because I just wanted to buy a pair.
Sure. Well, Raw Optics.
Yeah.
The guy's name is Paul. I can't remember. Starts with a M. His last name. Anyway, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
He really is. The owner of Raw Optics. So they're really good glasses.
Yeah, I got to get in touch with him to do a podcast with him as well.
About 6 years. I can send you his email if you like.
Okay, cool. Yeah. But Dave, we'll jump in. I want you to kind of dominate this podcast because you have so much knowledge and industry experience. But I'll just do a quick intro for the listeners.
Sure.
Because it's like February, January, February, it's still kind of like the New Year's-ish resolution period, and a lot of people, their health is important to them, their mental and physical health. And I've been trying to in any stage of change, there's just four steps to change. The first step is the problem unaware crowd,
Yeah.
and pretty much like 90% of people are in that stage, and they'll probably spend the rest of their life in that stage. And then the second stage is the problem aware, but they kind of just don't know what to do, or they have a lot of self-sabotaging behavior that prevents them from creating the change or resolving the problem they have.
Sure.
And then the third stage is obviously, they're creating that change. And the fourth stage is they're living that change altogether, and it's kind of like a permanent way of life. But for health professionals in particular, it's just kind of really tough. And that's why the medical drug dealing model of healthcare is so predominant because,
Sure.
a lot of people are just stuck in that problem unaware stage and or the second stage, and they just don't want to create change, or it doesn't create change. So healthcare professionals are stuck with just like throwing medical drugs at the problem, or just other kind of symptom management um, healthcare practices. And I wanted to invite you on today um, to discuss like food quality and get people in the problem unaware stage, the first stage. I felt
Hmm.
like the first time we did this, I had a beautiful intro, and now I'm kind of like stuttering to explain what I want to say. But basically, get people to be more aware of like, hey, there's like a gargantuous amount of chemicals in your food,
Yeah.
and processed food isn't natural, and just how a lot of this food is made isn't natural. And it's, of course, there's more than just food consumption when it comes to like mental and physical health, but it's one of those like main pillars of health because
100%. Yeah.
yeah, everything about the human body is made out of food, including the human mind, which consciousness
Sure.
uses to experience the external world. So obviously, if you're sourcing sick animals and plants grown with like a myriad of different chemicals, the individual can't
Mhm.
expect to be healthy themselves. And because of how propaganda works, when a lot of people get sick, especially in their like 30s, 40s, and
Yeah.
on, they kind of tend to blame like genetics or stuff of this sort, or like or it's age. And a lot of times, almost all the time, it's not the case. It's just like being exposed to poor quality food for long periods of time, being exposed to like environmental pollutants. Obviously industrial society is very fast paced, so it's very hard on the central nervous system, and it
100%.
causes people to break down from that vantage point too, et cetera, et cetera. So, you guys, I'm going to let Dave take over. He's been in the food policy space for a very long time, and to kind of give you guys the breakdown of what goes on behind the scenes and how it impacts the food you have available to you, and thus your health.
Yeah, I think we're getting a guest recommending that we center our cameras some in some way. I'm maybe that's what he wants. I don't know. But
Let me see.
anyway. Well, I just thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's always a pleasure to be on with you and to talk to you. I really appreciate your commitment to human health and trying to help other people get better. We need more people like you. You have a really deep background and a deep understanding of how food and how our food is grown actually impacts human health. Um, so I just appreciate the chance to speak with you and your audience. I would say my background is I'm from a small town in Iowa. I was raised in a Republican evangelical family. I think that's a part of my background. I was diagnosed with leukemia when I was a kid. I was 11 years old, and I used to play in rivers and streams in southern Minnesota. And then my friends and I would go to golf courses, and we would fish out free golf balls when we hit our ball in a golf ball pond. And we thought we had a pretty good deal getting golf balls. But in the summer of 2011, I'm sorry, when I was 11 years old, I had all my lymph nodes blow up, all over my body. And my parents didn't know what was going on. They brought me to a doctor, and they said, you have leukemia, and we're going to have to do chemotherapy. I would just say, my parents are evangelical, so they believe in God, and they didn't allow me to do chemotherapy. And ironically, there was a young girl in our town that was 2 years older than me, and my dad saw her at church, and he asked what they did for her, and they said, we did everything the doctor told us. And my dad immediately said, we're not going to do any of that, because it was just straight up chemotherapy. And I went to a series of alternative doctors, and that was really my beginning of understanding that food is medicine, and that the things that we're putting in our environment really have a huge impact on our health. And the other thing is, my dad was he was in the military. He was on all the last classes that was sent to Korea versus Vietnam. He was one of the last groups that went over there. And he said to me when I was growing up as a kid, we would drive across these farm fields, and he said, you know, these farmers are, and this is after Agent Orange and the links to basically they had a lot for Vietnam veterans. They had a lot of disease after Vietnam when they came back home, and a lot of his friends had cancers, and they also had birth defects for their children. And we'd be driving across the farmer's field, and he would say, you know, these farmers in the middle of the summer, they don't stop and put on protective gear or protective gloves, and they're stirring the pesticides with their hand. He goes, 20, 30 years from now, we're going to have an explosion in cancer. And that's exactly what's happened. And I was just say, I'm from a small town in Iowa. Iowa is a beautiful state with a lot of great farmers. Unfortunately, they're very heavily dependent on chemically industrial agriculture. Genetically engineered crops, corn and soybean are the two leading crops grown in our state. And so Iowa has the second highest rates of cancer of any state in the nation. It also has the highest, the rate of the way the cancer is rising is the highest in any state in the country. So we have to really look scientifically at the things that we're doing to our food and how the inputs farmers are using, and what that impact has in the long term on human health. And I'll just say, I know this is not really controversial now, but it was. I started in 2006. I moved back to Iowa to help my sister fight a factory farm that was going to be built half a mile from her farm. And she has 4 kids, and at that time, her two of her youngest boys had severe asthma, and that's very common for some children raised in rural America to have asthma, and because of the particulate matter from pesticides and pesticide pollution, but also I was the #1 factory farm producer of hogs. So if you eat bacon in the United States, most likely it's come from Iowa. And in a lot of cases, and the worst thing about, we have amazing farmers in Iowa, but they passed legislation in 1995, and this is why I work in public policy. Everything you eat on your plate, everything that comes on your plate has a direct impact. There is a law that's passed that makes it so that food basically has been approved. And in Iowa, they approved a bill that took away local officials' ability to say, we can't place this factory farm here. And so a giant factory farm is basically, it's 2,500 to 5,000 hogs in one building, or 1 million birds, 1 million chickens in a compound of like 6 buildings, 5 to 6 buildings. And so that has a massive like chemical output. I'm just saying, and that really impacts the environment. And so Iowa has the most polluted rivers and streams in the nation. It's like a third world country, because our elected officials have only gone with voluntary standards. And I would just say it's disheartening to me to watch this, but I have gotten involved in this fight, and I've stayed involved in this fight, because I think industrial agriculture works like a mafia, and they're strangling our democracy slowly, and they're making it so we can't keep good farmers on the land. And they have to, under Nixon, Earl Butz was the Secretary of Agriculture, and famously he said, get bigger, get out. Now, he's not the first Secretary of Agriculture to have that philosophy, but they really made it. And so and that was in the 70s. And after the 70s, they had a major farm crisis in the 80s. So rural America has been decimated by poor public policies and poor laws passed by members of Congress. And literally just yesterday, Congress put out their new farm bill. And a guy named Congressman G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania, he's also a dairy farmer, but he's put in this bill a provision. And so generally farm bills are basically written by industrial agriculture. They're written by big ag and big food, and they pretend to care about family farmers, but they really don't. And they rigged the system, and they created a monopoly system. And I just say that is why so many people in America are sick. They're producing junk food. And I would just say, interestingly enough, I was RFK Jr.'s top fundraiser for his presidential campaign. And I'm encouraged that Republicans today are at least listening to the fact that we need to get junk food out of SNAP payments or food stamp payments. I think that's a really good idea. That idea came up under the Obama administration, but it was shot down. And so people need to understand food stamps they really don't care about getting poor people healthy food. they're basically a payoff of our tax dollars to giant food monopolies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and Walmart is the biggest. Walmart, they talk about welfare moms. They should talk about Walmart's welfare. Walmart is the largest corporate recipient of welfare money in America. And they make billions of dollars on welfare, and they're not prioritizing healthy food for America's children.
How
So
come with the food stamps, I was always curious, and I knew like a lot of these food stamps were used for like processed food and like super
yeah,
junk food, but how come they don't restrict it to even if it's factory farmed meat or industrially grown crops? How come they don't restrict those food stamps to like, hey, you could only buy this factory farmed like chicken or beef or
yeah.
these vegetables or fruit, but just restrict it to these whole food kind of items because wouldn't they still benefit? The big monopoly chains.
Well, they would benefit. I was just saying, but it's Pepsi and Coca-Cola and Frito-Lay. They want you to buy chips. And they want you to buy soda, and a lot of times those are the cheapest, most affordable items in the grocery store, and that's because they receive billions of dollars, corn and soybeans,
Mm-hmm.
cotton, sugar beets, and canola. They receive billions of dollars in subsidies, and so they make these products. They actually suppress the price a farmer receives in the market, so they're making farmers poor and pushing them out of business so they can get bigger farms. But the ironic thing is, we have farmers going out of business, but we don't have corporations, the input companies, going out of business. Under the Obama administration, I supported the Obama administration, and when I moved back to Iowa in 2006. So in 2007, I advised the Obama campaign on food and agricultural policies that we thought would be beneficial for family farms. And one of the key things was antitrust or monopoly power, taking on giant food and agricultural monopolies. The interesting thing is, under the Obama administration, they actually did have a series of 5 investigations into major sectors of food and agriculture. They started in Iowa, and they were supposed to investigate seeds, but it was ironically at a building named for Monsanto and DuPont, who had given the most money to Iowa State University. So they took away the seed concentration and they made it on inputs only, right? So you have a system where we have giant agriculture monopolies manipulating basic regulatory reform right out of the gate. But I will say them at least talking about it made a difference. It raised what I did is I started a group, Food Democracy Now, and we went from basically 5 people to in a 8-year period to having 650,000 members across the country. And we tried to raise the consciousness and awareness around how big food and big agriculture get away with murder in Washington, D.C. by rigging their rules and regulations. And I think we had a huge impact in waking people up. Part of that came out the GMO labeling movement, the movement to label genetically engineered foods. And from that, this whole pesticide awareness kind of movement sprang up.
Yeah, the funny thing is when I mention absolutely anything on any forums regarding GMOs, although I'm more kind of like focused with my discussion on the herbicides or the various biocides used when these GMOs are used, it's always like some kind of sciencey kind of mutant looking dude like attacks me all the time,
Sure.
They're like, oh, these have been proven safe, and I give them like, I already have pre-saved like 20 different studies on just the herbicides or the biocides used with these crops, and then also just the studies on the negative effects of these crops in isolation on their own. And either they don't respond at all or they just like keep going with nonsense. But it's always funny. It's always like this very like sick looking, like Igor, Frankenstein's assistant looking dude that comes out and saying that's perfectly fine. I'm like, dude, have you looked at yourself in the mirror? Of course it's not perfectly fine. And like regarding your, I'm always a big believer that, sick people can't make healthy decisions or they wouldn't be sick to begin with. And a lot of our policy leaders are sick themselves, so it totally makes sense that they kind of go in favor on policies that obviously produce, sick animals and plants grown with a bunch of chemicals, which then inevitably, people can't be healthy eating that stuff. And they become you know, sick themselves, et cetera, et cetera. And then of course blame it on genetics, you know, where it's like far, far from the truth. So
Yeah, I'll just say, listen, it's ironic you're saying that every time you post a comment, it technically these are, you know, university scientists, or they're paid by the biotech industry. They're biotech industry trolls. And under the Obama administration, we had 4 GMO labeling ballot initiatives starting in 2012 to label genetically engineered foods. We weren't asking for a ban. We weren't asking for it to go away. We're just asking for a small label contains GMOs. It's basically like 12 letters. Please put this on a food package. Let the market decide. Let people decide whether this is a good food product. So ironically, literally 25, 30 minutes ago, right before I got on this thing, I was on LinkedIn, and there's actually an article fascinating that the Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, he and his wife Casey, somehow they have tested glyphosate residues in wheat, in bread, basically. That's a news story. I think in the last 2 weeks that story came out. And I'm very encouraged that they're testing glyphosate in our food products, because glyphosate food residues are very serious. And it's just like you said, there's all these guys on there, and I'll send you the link afterwards. I think it's a famous Dr. Robert Lustig's LinkedIn profile for anyone watching. And so I did this research in 2016. We found a lab. We went to like half a dozen labs across the Midwest in the U.S. to find out how much glyphosate was in our food residues. I'm sorry, how much food, glyphosate residues was in our food. And majority of labs refused to do the testing because they were terrified of the legal liability of what would happen if their lab found glyphosate in a food, and basically that they would go over and sue. Monsanto would sue them into oblivion. And that's happened repeatedly. And I'll just say, not just labs, but they've sued a lot of farmers. And so we found major glyphosate food residues in most of America's popular foods. And ironically, the highest, and so just if you don't know, glyphosate is the main chemical ingredient in Roundup. Roundup is Monsanto's best-selling weed killer. It's the most widely used weed killer in America. It's the most widely used weed killer on the planet in human history. And the ironic thing is, after they banned DDT, they needed to find a less toxic, more beneficial pesticide. And what they did is they found this chemical that killed weeds slowly. It's kind of slowly strangles the micronutrient content out of a plant, and so their plant dies from a basically that shuts down their immune system. It shuts down their plant's ability to receive chlorophyll, and so what they did is they claimed that this is the safest, most non-toxic chemical or pesticide in human history. The reality is, it was first approved in it was first patented in 1964 by Stouffer Chemical Company. It was like Drano. Basically, what it's doing is descale industrial boilers or pipes to take calcium out of the pipes. And what it does is it shuts down your aromatic amino acids. So it shuts down 3 essential amino acids that your body needs, and it strangles, it chelates essential minerals. And as it does that, the plant gets sick, and basically a pathogen will come up and kill those weeds. And so they genetically engineered corn, soybeans, cotton, sugar beets, canola, alfalfa. Even they've actually genetically engineered more plants to be resistant to glyphosate, but they didn't want, no one wants them on the market because actually glyphosate is so toxic. So in 2015, the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer determined that glyphosate, they did a 2-year study of basically Sprague Dawley rats. Now, Sprague Dawley rats have a propensity to grow tumors when they're exposed to toxins. That's why they're used in laboratory studies to determine how toxic this substance will be, and then they can extrapolate. They have all this. They can extrapolate to human health. So in 2015, this study came out, and it showed that there were massive tumor growths in lab rats, and there was it was ironic that they had an increase in breast cancer. And so the ironic thing is, this is the world's leading cancer expert on the planet, and Monsanto tried to shut them down. Republicans in Congress basically led a witch hunt against IARC and those scientists, and they tried to discredit them. But the great news is, in the last 11 years, massive numbers of scientists and peer-reviewed studies have come out confirming that glyphosate not just causes cancer, and I would say, listen, cancer is an end-stage disease that you're going to get from the harms of glyphosate. What it does is it's patented as an antibiotic. It has 4 patents on it. One is to descale minerals from industrial boilers. The other one is as a weed killer, and that basically what it shuts down is essential amino acids, and so you can't get micronutrient content for healthy food. And the other one is as an antibiotic. So humans don't have a shikimate pathway. Unfortunately, the bacteria in our stomach do. And so what happens when you spray glyphosate on fields year after year after year, you're shutting down the soil's ability to grow healthy food, because you're shutting down the essential microbes that it needs to deliver. I mean, basically you need active microbial activity in the soil to deliver nutrients into the roots and be uptaken into the plant. But it does the same thing in our gut. It shuts down your basic your gut microbiome. So talk about people being unhealthy. That's why we have a rise in celiac disease. That's why we have a rise in gut health and autoimmune issues. I think the last time I read, there's 60 to 70 million people in America that have gut health issues. And this is directly correlated to glyphosate being sprayed on oats, wheat, barley, chickpeas, lentils, dry beans. It's also sprayed on almonds, apples. It's sprayed on 70 different food crops. And as it does it, it kills the beneficial microbes on those plants and in that soil. And it eventually weakens the autoimmune system of the plants in that habitat in that area. But when we eat that food, it kills our gut microbiome. And so the ironic thing is, in a long about way, I'll get to November 2016, we published this glyphosate food residue report. Cheerios was the #1 food that had the highest level. It was literally off the charts. It was 1,056 parts per billion. And just to give you an idea, that doesn't sound like a lot, but just to give you an idea, peer review of how harmful that is, peer-reviewed studies have shown that 0.1 and 0.01% of glyphosate in a system can cause fatty liver disease and damage your liver and your kidneys. So we have a major problem with glyphosate it's called a desiccation, where they spray these plants right before they're harvested. And you can't wash it off. You can't cook it off. It stays in there, and it destroys your gut health, your gut microbiome, and your immune system. So I would just say you're lucky if you live long enough to get cancer from glyphosate and Roundup. But I'll just say the farm bill that dropped yesterday on Friday afternoon or Friday morning contains a provision in there. It's called a Cancer Gag Act, or Pesticide Liability Shield. They're trying to protect Bayer. Bayer bought Monsanto in 2015. Bayer is obviously a famous German pharmaceutical company. Bayer's background is that they created Zyklon B for the gas chambers in Auschwitz for the Nazis. And then, fortunately, we have Monsanto that created genetically engineered seeds. They created, Agent Orange for Vietnam. So you have two military industrial complex corporations that are now producing our food. Monsanto was absorbed into Bayer in 2018, and that just happens to be the year that there's these major lawsuits against Bayer for improperly or failing to disclose that their glyphosate and Roundup cause cancer in humans. I think since 2018, 2019, they've paid out over $11 billion to 100,000 cancer victims. But right now, this provision it's a Cancer Gag Act or Pesticide Liability Shield. Right now, they're trying to make it so it's illegal. It's no longer allowed to sue Bayer because they failed to give a proper disclosure of cancer on their product warnings.
Yeah, and you guys, I know you guys probably follow a bunch of these silly parrot influencers, these science-backed influencers online. So
Sure.
some popular ones like Dr. Ease would say like the pesticides are tested for safety, etc. So they're totally fine to eat. So my advice for you guys is next time you hear that, ask them to provide any reasonable data that proves they're safe. And what they will provide you, even on their little clips that go viral and stuff, what they will provide you is like, see, we went to a government website, and here's the list of studies they did, and it was perfectly safe. But if you look at those studies, you will see that they never test the complete formulation
Yep.
for safety. And that is inevitably how it's going to be used in the field. What they do is actually, and I know you know this already, Dave, I'm just kind of talking to the audience through you here. What they do is just test the active ingredient, like what Dave was saying, just glyphosate in isolation on its own, but no one just uses glyphosate. In isolation,
True.
like glyphosate is not that very strong of a herbicide. But then when you put it into a complete formulation with all those inert ingredients, it all of a sudden becomes much more powerful, much more deadly, and much more persistent in the environment as well. And that is how it's used out in the
Yeah.
field. And oftentimes, what happens is a lot of farmers just use a bunch of different complete formulations. They even combine it in the same exact container, and then kind of just spray that depending on the needs of that particular crop in that region, et cetera, et cetera. There's like zero safety testing done on any of that. So don't listen to these kind of parrot industry shills, like Dr. Is, at least when I did the report on his claims of the safety of pesticides, was sponsored by like some big soda company. I forgot the name of it, but I got it from
Oh, really?
someone else. And
Yeah.
he actually even got, a notice letter
Oh,
uh,
wow.
mentioning that, and kind of set that up in the report as well. But you guys, there's no safety testing done, whatever these silly data influences that are just looking at paper. They never even farmed themselves or have even been out on a farm or ranch themselves. They're just kind of looking at industry paper. And a lot of these industry studies are done in-house by scientists on these companies, chemical companies, payrolls, and then they're sent to a government agency for approval,
Yep.
where like the average consumer thinks like, oh, it's the government that's going out there approving it and running their own tests, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's also, like you mentioned, this kind of revolving door practice where people in the FDA, for example, don't want to rock the boat with any of these companies, because inevitably when their time in the FDA is up, they go work for these companies for a much higher salary. And the last thing you want to do is burn
Yeah.
bridges and then kind of lose this salary potential, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a very real problem, you guys. And I'm telling you, like, in terms of the cancer that Dave mentioned, like 50% of Americans develop cancer in their lifetime now, and half of them die from it, close to like
Yeah.
650,000 Americans. And I'm pretty sure everyone listening knows someone that's died from cancer in their family, So it's not like this kind of lottery winning chance. It's a
Yeah.
very high chance. 50% is a coin toss, of developing cancer, and stuff of this sort. So, you guys, this is super serious. It goes under the table. You mentioned that with chronic digestive issues, actually 45% of Americans have chronic digestive issues their entire life.
Wow. Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a very small percentage. So half the population is pretty crazy, and so it is a very serious problem. And I know one of these things is kind of like everyone and their grandmother thinks they know about good nutrition, but trust me, you guys, there's so much more to it than you think.
Yep.
And it's not true. Most people don't know anything about nutrition or what goes into their food, like literally, like not even zero, just negative.
Hmm.
Like I mentioned the last time we had a chat, it's like 90% of Americans right now are metabolically sick, and also close to 90% are either overweight or obese. So when you get into those kind of categories of health issues, with 70% of Americans on some kind of medical drug, with most either on 2 to 3 different medical drugs. When you get into these
Very
kind of
shocking. Yeah.
when you get into these pathways of pathology, two things. Like, a person knows absolutely nothing about nutrition, and it's important to be cognizantly aware of that, so you can kind of change your ways. Because if you don't sense that those things are wrong, or dealing with all these health problems, is anything wrong with it, you're never going to change, because you're only going to change if you sense that there's a problem. So if you don't see a problem, change isn't going to happen, and people are again going to be stuck into this first stage of change of nothing ever happening. And guys, this is so serious, because like it's the weekend. Step outside anywhere in America, literally anywhere, any city, any town. I challenge you guys to prove me wrong. Look around, and the first 10 people you run into, 9 are going to be full of obesity, misery, medical drug dependence, and disease.
No.
Okay, try to prove me wrong. You guys won't. It'll be very difficult, like in any city, from Seattle to New York to
I
Austin,
wish we
whatever.
could prove you wrong. I mean, you're 100% right. It's
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm curious, have you ever been confused by the labels in the grocery store? In Yevgeny's book, he demystifies the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. He also covers how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and other related topics. It's a beautifully illustrated, non-technical read that comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning materials. Jump on Amazon and check out the book titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Eugene Trufkin. Now let's dive back into the podcast.
Yeah, you know, I was born in 1968, so I'm 57 years old. It wasn't like this when I was a kid. I know one kid in my whole grade school that was overweight. You know what I mean? And today he would be considered moderately skinny compared to what most kids are. And this is I think we have a problem where we have an overabundance of cheap, empty calories, and we have, you know, our bodies are starved for real nutrition. And so the question is, for me, I want to get, I'm from a small town and not a big city at all. And I'll just say, it's hard to get access to organic food. Most of the food in our grocery stores is just processed food. Walmart has pushed out other grocery stores in our area, and you know, it's really hard for people to understand. I'm just saying, we live in an ocean of disinformation, of corporate food disinformation. We're intentionally bombarded. I'm just saying, if you watch Super Bowl ads, I think this Super Bowl, they had some ads for healthy food. It was one of the first times, and you know, the Super Bowl is watched by tens of millions of people here in the United States. I don't watch it. I played football in high school. I played football in college. I don't really watch much sports, just because I don't have time for it. And I'll just say, they are pushing junk food on kids. They have like billions of dollars of advertising in TV and print, for junk food for children. I mean, it's an abomination. And for decades, basically nonprofits and public policy advocates have said, we have to stop this. We're poisoning our children, and they have not listened. They've refused to listen. And I've been in it for 20 years, a little over 20 years right now. I have friends who have been fighting this for 30 years, and their friends who have been fighting this corruption in our public food system and agriculture for 40 years. So my question is, if we live in a democracy in America, we like the marketing slogan is land of the free, home of the brave, but it's really land of the sick and home of the dying. You know, we're fat, sick, and dying right now. So I'm encouraged. And so I just happen to know RFK Jr. I met him in 2007. I gave him a tour of factory farms in Iowa. He was, Bobby was a huge environmentalist before he became a public health advocate and took on vaccines, and the medical freedom and health freedom issue. So I'll just say, I met him as an environmentalist, where he was concerned about how factory farms had an impact on water quality, and also how factory farms were decimating rural America and basically pushing family farmers out of business. So I told you about that bill in 1995. It was called House File 519. It passed in Iowa legislature in 1995. It was signed by the governor. And 30 years later, 75 to 80% of our independent hog farmers have been pushed out of business. So I'm just saying, like, this industrial food system, it's not just created a massive abundance of obesity, but it's creating massive poverty across rural America.
Yeah.
You know?
And in terms
I find that, I'm just going to say, I find that really heartbreaking. And so for me, like, I try to be very common sense about how I get people to make change. And, you know, everyone thinks that organic food is much more expensive than industrial food. And I'm like, if you're going to buy sugar pops or corn pops, eventually you're going to get sick. But the real question is, what is the price of cancer? What is the price of long-term chronic illness and disease in our culture? And it's hundreds of billions of dollars a year. I think I was working on a report a couple of weeks ago. I think a study found that just endocrine disrupting chemicals in our environment and food cost our country $350 billion a year. So that's an economic cost. I don't like to think of it like that. I like to think more in a human cost. I think that's more important. So I'll just say, like, organic food is the best investment you can buy for your long-term health. And I think it's not just long-term health for yourself, but it also helps the environment, helps heal the environment. And it also helps farmers that are doing it the right way, basically. So we need to transition to a system where we have more organic food and agriculture and more regenerative soil health practices practiced by America's farmers.
Yeah, and there's another pushback that I typically hear here, or like, oh, even eating healthy food or whole food, or especially organic food, is like way too expensive. But it's not. You guys, if you're honest with yourself and you kind of sat down with your bank account and just kind of looked over the numbers in detail, honestly, not like from a delusional vantage point of not being able to do basic math, you'll see that first and foremost, maintaining like a body that's like 250 pounds plus in the US, like an obese physique, cost thousands and thousands of dollars in processed food and junk food every year. Just that alone, and the average American is spending like $8,000 to $16,000 a year on non-essential expenses, no problem.
Yeah.
Left and right, without questioning it at all. The eating out, alcohol, subscription services, processed food is extremely, extremely expensive. Like a bag of potato chips, it's like, I don't know, $5 to $7, but it takes like 2 potatoes to make that bag of potato chips. Those 2 potatoes are like 50 cents or something like that. Okay, so the markup is huge. And whenever you eat out, the markup on the food is at least like 300% plus, depending on you. For that restaurant to be profitable, they need to charge you those rates. So it's very expensive. Meal by meal, it doesn't seem like it, but once you add it up all at the end of the year, you're looking at no less, even people in poverty are spending no less than $8,000 a year on non-essential expenses. Most Americans are around like the $10,000 to $12,000 a year mark, no problem, on like total BS, sugar highs at best, provides no value to your life whatsoever. And then you tell them like, hey, 2,000 calorie, let's say at least USDA organic certified diet, even if it's industrial organic, you're looking at like 7,000 a year, 7 or 8,000 a year, depending on exactly which items you're buying. And they're like, well, it's way too expensive. I'm like, well, how's that so expensive? You're spending even way more than that on your non-essential expenses, And like I mentioned, the 250-pound male physique in the US, it's so gargantuously expensive to maintain, directly and indirectly. Indirectly through lost labor and needing to retire earlier, et cetera, because of health problems. You're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then in the immediate moment, you're spending thousands upon thousands of dollars a year on processed food, junk food. I'm not saying you're eating McDonald's every year, but trust me, you're not going to be 250 plus pounds without eating a bunch of processed food or high calorie, low nutrient dense foods. No way. And no, it's not your genetics. No way. Like Dave mentioned, in America, it was like a lottery winning chance of seeing an obese person in like 1950. Now
it's shocking to see photos from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. I'll just say it really is. One of the things is, I'd like to talk more about your book, not just your new book, but your book on factory farms. Basically explaining how our food is raised and how that I'm just saying, I think that's, you brought up, you're talking about food and cost of food. I'd like to put out some solutions for people. Thrive Market is a great way for people to buy affordable, healthier food. It's basically processed food or boxed food, but you can buy industrial organic or processed organic foods that don't have synthetic chemicals on them. And it's a lot more affordable than it is at the grocery store. For a lot of people in America, They either live in food deserts. Most people in rural America aren't able to buy organic food at the grocery store. And so ironically, I ran Food Democracy Now! From 2008 into 2016. And in 2000, I think 14 and 15, Thrive Market, and I think it's thrivemarket.com. They started out, and what their idea was to create like a Whole Foods that's online, and they have a discount like 15 to 30% off on these processed foods. I think it's really important when we talk about trying to get people healthier that we provide them solutions or ways to get access to healthier food. So I have eaten a lot of junk food in my life. I'm 6'5", over 275. I played football in college as an offensive lineman. So I'll just say people are going to reach for convenience. We have a junk food culture. We have a convenience culture. The other thing is people are overweight today because they don't get outside. I was just looking at a study from 1939, and it talked about how sunlight impacts the male endocrine system. It helps increase testosterone. Today, we have not just a junk food, but a junk light. Our indoor lighting kills your body's ability to properly have a proper functioning hormonal system. So I'm just saying there's a lot of things that go into this and why we're sick. And that's why I'm wearing these glasses. I stare at a computer screen for 5 to 6 hours a day. That's not going to make, it's just the blue light on my eyes is going to make me sicker and make me gain more weight, probably an extra 10 pounds, 20 pounds, depending on your body size.
Yeah, and some other websites to check out too are eatwild.com. You can go to the top left last time I was on the website and click on this tab, and it'll show you a map of all small farmers you can buy directly from, and most of them deliver to you, if you're kind of a little bit further away. But how well scattered they are, pretty much everyone actually has access to them. You can find multiple within your state in any state.
Yeah.
And then another one is americangrassfed.org. You can go to the bottom of that website. They have an interactive map. You can click on that map. And again, they have a bunch of actually AGA certified ranches where they do on-site inspections to make sure the animals are raised on pasture 24/7 all year round, not just during certain seasons. And you can find one in your local area where a lot of them deliver, as well for a reasonable price. Usually it's best to order in bulk then, so you could economize on the delivery also, et cetera, et cetera. But honestly, Dave, I think what the real issue is there is a bit of an information problem, I'm sure, but I think the real issue is kind of like you hinted at, which is being supported by corporate America. But the real issue is just American core values are just all out of whack. People are, and again, corporate propaganda has kind of thrown fuel on the fire, or fuel on the 100%. Fire here. But people here, it's like they think what isn't important is most important, and what is important is least important. And I know a lot of people say oh yeah, mental and physical health is most important, but their actions are saying the complete opposite. And it's not what people say, it's what they do. And like I mentioned with those numbers, with 90% of Americans being metabolically sick and 85% either being overweight or obese now, 70% actually straight up obese, that indicates that, they're not living a sustainable lifestyle. They're not living a health conscious lifestyle. And it's like a mind virus issue that makes that acceptable, because there's a certain script in their mind that makes this acceptable. I have this X amount of money to spend, 8 to 16,000, but I'm going to spend it on total bullshit, and then kind of talk myself out of that. Whole food or even organic food is too expensive for me. That's total bullshit. That's like a mind virus. It's a disease, and that disease is leading to behaviors that are making it acceptable to do certain things that deteriorate human biology over time.
Yeah, listen, we do live in a very sick society. It's not an accident. I grew up believing, as a Republican, America, I was just explaining to my wife, America is a great country. I think the people of America, the average everyday citizens, are great individuals. I do believe the ideas in our Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, I do believe they have allowed greater economic freedom for a larger percentage of a population that has ever been allowed in most of human history. But the reality is this is a rigged system that we live in today. We are not governed in a true democracy. We're in a true democratic fashion. We live in an oligarchy. And just like if you look across history, if you look at Rome and British Empire, whenever the elite or the wealthiest people in the nation, wherever they take the lion's share of wealth and they do not allow that wealth to be spread across the middle class and the working class, you have a massive disruption of people's ability to make real positive cognitive decisions. And I think that's what's happened to us today. We have today, and now they've actually, with the internet, with algorithms, with Facebook and Twitter and all these things, they have mastered the art of deception through algorithms that pop content into our faces. And so we're on a hamster wheel of infotainment, like constantly. And so that distraction, that distractibility makes it hard for you to make positive and good decisions. Like I'm just saying, like 100 years ago, people didn't waste 5 hours a day. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, people today, your average high schooler or teenage kid or a college student in the 20s, they're spending 5 to 6 hours a day just watching meaningless content, right? And so my biggest fear is that, unfortunately, technology should be liberating. It should be freeing to your average person. But unfortunately, they're making, just like our food is junk food, we have a junk technology culture that's making us all addicted to the wrong things. So I think that's a part of the problem. And for me, I can't solve the problem in health in the United States or the problem with our food and farming and agriculture without people being active participants in their democracy, without actively voting and taking place. And I used to have to stand up and speak all the time. I did a lot of public debates during the GMO labeling situation. And I'll just say, today we have the best democracy that money can buy. And we actually have a drive-by democracy. We are so, if you look at a Brave New World, we have so much fake entertainment that's distracting us. They're stealing our basic civic rights on a daily basis by bribing politicians with campaign donations. Ironically, I've been a campaign fundraiser, so I know what it's like. Like, if you can't raise, I was RFK Jr.'s finance director in 2023 as top fundraiser. If you cannot raise money in a campaign, you can't get your message out. You can't organize properly. We're in a system that is intentionally rigged through technology and our economic system where you have to have a lot of money to be able to gain traction, basically.
Well, I haven't been keeping up with it too much. I just generally don't keep up with politics too well in general.
Sure.
But how's RFK been doing? How do you feel his progress has been?
Well, I'm encouraged. Listen, I'm encouraged that he comes from a very long line of Democrats. I met him as an environmentalist. He was a leading environmentalist of his generation. He's been a top environmental attorney for 40 years. And then he moved into the vaccine issue because some moms who had children with autism were very concerned. And he dove into that issue head first. And I would just say I'm thankful that he's at Health and Human Services. I think he's done a pretty good job overall in elevating the issues of how our toxic food system is harmful to human health and how it's bad for the environment. But I'm just saying he's not the head of the United States Department of Agriculture. And the USDA is the one that regulates how our food is grown. It determines how much farmers are going to get paid. It determines, and Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins, she's unfortunately laid off over 20,000 USDA employees, and some of she's laid off, I think, 2,000 to 3,000 employees in the NRCS, which stands for I think it's Natural Resources Conservation Service. But anyway, the NRCS is one of the most important departments within the USDA because it helps farmers transition to better soil health practices. Under the Biden administration, I was able to work with Secretary Bill Sack and some people in NRCS to try to get better soil health practices. And, so listen, I would just say, Bobby, RFK Jr. has done a great job elevating the awareness of these issues and the problems that are facing. Republicans have embraced the idea of toxic food, and that right now, I think at least 10 to 20 states have put bills forward on to get rid of food dyes in foods in Texas. I think Arizona, West Virginia, Oklahoma. There's a bunch of states, and so I think that's really important. But I'll just say I don't think food dyes they're important, but they're not like pesticides. And so he's not in charge of the USDA. He's not in charge of the EPA or the Environmental Protection Agency. There's a guy, Lee Zeldin, who's a former congressman. He's in charge of the EPA. And unfortunately, Mr. Zeldin has, I like to call it every pesticide approved agency, because any pesticide that's come for reapproval under his department has been approved. They've approved like 5 or 6 PFAS pesticides that contain PFAS, which are forever chemicals. They're going to contaminate hundreds of millions of acres of U.S. farmland. They recently reapproved dicamba, which I think had been deregulated or delisted twice previously. It's and dicamba is definitively known to cause cancer and reproductive problems, but they just reapproved it in the last month. And so, it's like 1 step forward, 2 steps back in many ways. But technically, I'm very encouraged that RFK Jr. is in this administration. It's unusual to have an environmentalist, someone that spent 40 years of their life working for the environment and standing up to. I mean, he took on all the big oil companies. He took on Smithfield and Tyson. He sued Monsanto. I think he was one of the lead attorneys, or a group of attorneys that was the original plaintiff, had an original plaintiff lawsuit against Monsanto's on glyphosate causing cancer. So, I mean, technically, he's got a tough job to do, but I think he's probably better qualified than anyone I know, especially anyone I know in the Republican Party. So I think he's done a good job as an ambassador and waking people up and waking elected officials up, but it's not an easy road to be the head of HHS. I know that there's a lot of Democrats, and I was raised a far right Republican, but then I became a Democrat in 2001 during 9/11. A friend of mine died in the World Trade Center, and I went for a job. I was in grad school in New York at the time, so I went for a run. Like literally the next day, I'm 2 miles away from ground zero. And in 7 minutes, I get a severe pounding headache. Just like, I'm like, this is so abnormal. I have to stop running. My head hurts so bad in less than 10 minutes. And so I listened to George Bush, Bush 2. I listened to his, I think Christine Todd Whitman was ahead of his EPA. She said, well, there's no particulate matter. It doesn't cause cancer. It's not harmful. Everyone's safe. And they lied to the American people about how toxic this stuff is all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'll just say I'm encouraged that Bobby is in the position that he's in. I think he's done a great job. He's in a lot better shape than the previous head of the Health and Human Services under Biden. He's very physically fit. He takes health seriously. So I think he's a good role model in a lot of ways, but he's probably made some mistakes, according to a lot of people, especially people in the pharmaceutical industry that are upset with him. Yeah.
I think it was like yesterday or something. This just shows you how brainwashed lost like most people are. Like the 90% that are stuck in stage 1, they're showing like a picture of Bobby. And again, I don't even follow like the details of what he's saying, but like basically they mentioned, if you follow this guy's health advice, you're a retard. This is the reason Americans are so healthy. I'm like, and of course the guy was like super overweight. He's like talking about his antidepressant use on his page. Stereotypical super sick person, somehow upset at Bobby for making him this way, although he's that way for probably like 30, 40 years already. And I kind of mentioned, I'm like, dude, so first of all, to be clear, like this has been a problem going on for like 50 years, 50, 60, 70 years. And Americans are currently, like mentally and physically the sickest humans in all of human history, not because of freaking Bobby telling people to eat whole food, and changing the pyramid around a little bit. I'm like, man, how like fucking retarded can you be? And
Well,
it makes sense that they're so
yeah,
sick and so mentally troubled because
sure.
obviously, that's why they are where they are, but because they're in stage one, and because pathology has been normalized to such an extreme extent in the US, they're like, well, I'm on 2 antidepressants, but my friends are like on 5, so I'm
Yeah,
okay. I'm like, no, both of you are like super sick and need serious help and an overhaul on your complete life. And you need
sure.
to be humble at times and say, like, man, I'm headed in the wrong direction if I need to take all these pharmaceuticals and I'm this overweight and
Yeah,
I need serious help. And it's okay. Not everyone knows everything. I need to help with certain portions of my life and different aspects of life, et cetera, et cetera. That's just how it is. But just remaining nesting in that pathology is beyond comical and ludicrous. And you see it
yeah,
everywhere. And then, of course, instead of focusing on that, no, it's like Bobby's fault, because he took
yeah,
dyes out
exactly.
of food. Oh, like, dude, retard.
He's been there
Like,
12. He's been there. Literally, I think it's a 12 months, exactly a year, and they want to blame him for all these problems that have, like you said, have existed for 5 decades. Um, you know,
yeah, and the other person in office that you mentioned under the Democrat is that kind of mutant. I'm like, dude, how come I didn't hear any of this complaining about like when they were in office? Americans
well,
were
because he
still
fits.
all
He fits.
medically drugged out of
Yeah,
their mind and sick. Like, why don't you blame her or him or whatever?
he fits the politically correct narrative that the elite and the Epstein elite want to promote. I'll just say that. That'll be my one plug on the Epstein files. But I'll just say, you brought up, and I was reading your book. I just want to say, like, I'm going to put a plug in here. If you get a chance to buy this book,
Not for
very
sale yet.
American Culture and the Normalization of Pathology. It's a normalized pathology. It's very good. And I'll just say, like, I was looking at it yesterday, and I was like, not just are 70% of Americans on fucking pharmaceuticals, 20% are on antidepressants. I mean, you have to be kidding me. What society thinks that they're a success or that they're leaders at anything when 20, like 1 out of 5 people are taking a medication just so their brain works normally so they don't kill themselves? I'm just saying, like, I have been on Prozac, I have been on antidepressants, anti-anxiety drugs. I was on Prozac, and I'll just say it's a very dangerous drug. The theory that SSRIs work properly through changing your brain chemistry is false. It is a
Mm-hmm.
bullshit theory pushed by Pfizer and a lot of these corrupt pharmaceutical executives. And I'll just say the reason we have a lot of rise in suicides, the reason we have majorly depressed children, and the reason we have a rise in school shootings is because we have a rise in these anti-depressant, antipsychotic medications, and they cause a lot more. They literally cause more problems than they solve in reality. And one thing I want to bring up, Bobby, one more time, because you mentioned he's getting criticized, and I think recently in the last week or two, he brought up that a ketogenic diet can potentially cure schizophrenia. And so the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industry, the doctors are losing their mind thinking that somehow food can impact our mental health. Like you said earlier, like food is what forms our very function, the very basis of us. If we have a messed up hormone system, if we do not have the proper micronutrients to be healthy, our brain is not going to work properly. Our hormone system, our endocrine system, our immune system isn't going to be working properly, and our brain isn't going to function. So I'll just say I was given antidepressant medication and anxiety medication. For me, it caused way more problems than it solved. The other thing is I have partial seizure disorder, so I was on a anti-seizure medication for over a decade, and I went off it. I mean, and then I had a bunch of seizures. But I'll just say, my doctor and Dr. Amen Medical Clinic recommended that I go on a ketogenic diet. I did that for a year and a half. Not only did I lose a bunch of weight, but my seizures stopped. I went off medication for 7 years, and then my seizures came back. And so it's a partial seizure. I'll just kind of pass out, and my left side of my body gets paralyzed basically, and then I kind of can't move for a couple minutes. I get very shallow breathing. I have had a couple, like 3 or 4 grand mal seizures, but that's not the type of I don't have epilepsy. I have a partial seizure disorder from getting hit in the head with a baseball bat and a bar stool. I'll just say I've had a very exciting life. But when I was put on a
That
ketogenic
explains
diet,
why you got into politics.
yes,
Now I can put all
exactly.
the pieces
Well,
together, you know?
yes, I'm a grassroots organizer.
Yeah.
I'm in the trenches basically. But I'll just say, like, literally, if I had in 2015 and 2016, this is when I was having my seizures were increasing, and I was starting to have my seizure symptoms changed. So I used to have seizures every couple of weeks, sometimes a few times a day, and then they started to increase. I started to have them when I was walking. Now that's a very dangerous thing to have a seizure when you're walking across the street or driving a car. And so I had to go to doctors, and I went to Dr. Amon's medical clinic, and he recommended that I go on a ketogenic diet. But right before I did this, if I was having a pint, if I was having any ice cream, there was a 25 to 30% chance that I would have a partial seizure. I don't know if it was the sugar and the dairy, what the combination had, how that plays in the electrical system of your brain. But literally, as soon as I went on a ketogenic diet, my seizures stopped.
Yeah.
My mood improved. I had insomnia for decades. It went away. So I'm not recommending a ketogenic diet for everyone. I don't think it's a solution for everything, but food is medicine. Food is the original medicine that we have. And I'm just saying, this is what our ancient ancestors used to go back to heal people by changing their diet. If you look at India, one of the most ancient cultures, largest population on earth, Ayurvedic diets are very scientific. Unfortunately, Western medicine doesn't take them serious because they can't patent it, and they can't make billions of dollars off it.
And to kind of further reinforce, I had actually one of my former clients on here. He also had a history of seizures, and we got him to lose 100 pounds. Change his diet completely around. He hasn't had a seizure in like 3 years.
Wow, that's great.
So to further reinforce exactly what you're saying, and then also more reinforcement, like the chemical imbalance theory of depression. So guys, whoever believes this in 2026, please don't listen to Dave and I. Just go to PubMed.gov and find a single study that proves your depression is solely due to some type of chemical imbalance in your brain. I'm going to save you a gargantuous amount of time and say you're not going to find anything, because you're not. It's been disproven so long ago, but in 2026, the bulk majority of SSRI users still believe this theory. And when I mention it to them, they're like shocked. And if you go to your psychiatrist or family physician and they give you this stuff, just lightly ask them, can you provide a single study that conclusively shows that my depression is due to a chemical imbalance in my brain, and it's not due to the fact that, maybe I have chronic anger turned inwards, or, unmet needs for prolonged periods of time, or a very bad diet. I'm eating sick animals and plants grown with a bunch of chemicals that are, of course, going to affect my brain chemistry, or that I'm working like crazy hours, that the central nervous system hasn't evolved to deal with. Please tell me it's not any of that stuff, and it's just this chemical imbalance. And then my big question for you is how would taking that medication help resolve all that other shit that's decreasing the quality of your life tremendously? You got to start thinking critically, guys. I know you want a lot of people are very myopic because they're so rushed by industrial society and they want this kind of quick fix. But if all these quick fixes worked, we'd all be fixed by now. But it's the complete opposite. Americans are literally mentally and physically the sickest humans in all of human history. All of it.
Oh, very much so.
All of it.
Yeah.
So come on, guys. I hate to see you guys being taken advantage of and being seen as a fool. And it's time to kind of wake up and, look in the mirror and take responsibility and accountability for yourself. The tables are against you, like Dave mentioned, with all this corporate propaganda and BS like that. But you still have so many amazing resources and great answers out there too.
Yeah.
No,
listen, I was holding up this study. It's what modern science is really learning is the bacteria in our stomach, our gut microbiome, has a lot more impact on our mental health and our emotional well-being, our anxiety levels and depression, than the theory of brain chemistry being out of balance.
Yeah.
And, there's something, the gut-brain axis. It's very, it's a massive, in the last 10, 12, 15 years, major research has come out about this. I often think that, I do believe food is medicine. It's fundamental to my life, and it's fundamental to the philosophy that I try to advance in DC or in public policy, or just advocate personally. And it's what I would ask people to convert to themselves, is try to take back your health by changing your diet. And don't try to do it all at once. It doesn't mean you can't have ice cream. It doesn't mean you can't have French fries or pizza or whatever snack you want, but just try to have it in balance. And the other thing is, all our food has been made really addictive. Like, all these food scientists have, for 40, 50 years, have specialized in labs. They make the food in America very addictive. But I'll just say, if you want to find a solution to your health, look at populating your gut microbiome with healthy gut bacteria. You can do it. There's many different ways. I'll just say, for me, one of the best people that I find online is Dr. Berg. I don't know if you know Dr. Berg. I don't know if it's Dr. Eric Berg, but just look up his videos online. He describes the situation very well. But I literally just printed out this study today. Signaling cognition, the gut microbiome, biota, and hypothalamic, pituitary, and adrenal axis. So this is peer-reviewed science from 2023, talking about the microbiota gut-brain axis and how there's a biodirectional signaling pathways that operate through neural, endocrine, immune, and metabolic pathways. So this is the new scientific theory. And I think this is why, like you said, America has kind of gone mad in a lot of ways. Our elected officials are not healthy. I think there's micronutrient deficiencies from the very poor people in our society that are malnutrition, but even the elite are not eating a healthy diet. I would just say the funny thing is, hilarious thing, RFK Jr. got busted on a plane with Trump,
Yeah.
and they all had McDonald's. And I'll just say, I don't know how Donald Trump stays alive eating that diet. I know, but I'm just saying, allegedly he only eats that diet when he's traveling. But if you're president, you're traveling all the time. So I'm just saying, like, your average person can't eat that way, because they don't have a bunch of private chefs waiting to feed them food. But I would just say, I think it's really important that people try to look at their gut microbiome and try to figure out how they can get healthier. I think it's a really important way.
And there are a bunch of great stool tests people can order, like the BiomeFX or GI map test as well, that are delivered to your house. You need to do this through probably like a registered dietitian in most cases. I have like a good friend of mine, Lori Chang and Jackie Hatchett, that could do that for you. So if you need a resource, just message me and I'll be happy to connect you guys with them. I don't get any money from this at all, just happy to help. That way you can have like a good objective way of looking at how healthy your gut microbiome is, and then you can take the corrective action from there. But again, you guys, before we close out, please return back to critical thinking a little bit. I know it's a little bit tough, being, stressed out with life, and industrial society tends to be very fast paced and not conducive to how the central nervous system has evolved to function. But, if you're struggling with, excess weight, trust me, it's not your genetics. If you're struggling with high blood pressure, it's not your genetics. If you're struggling with high resting blood glucose levels, it's not your genetics. Or triglycerides, not your genetics. Or HDL, not your genetics. Or low testosterone at a younger age, not your genetics. And anyone that says this to you, just use your critical thinking skills. Ask them to provide you with concrete evidence that shows that any of those things are solely impacted by your genetic makeup. And they're not going to be able to provide anything for you. And even in the 1 out of like 500 or 1,000 cases where it might be like maybe more inclination towards that, and those ultra rare lottery winning chances, maybe genetics does load the gun, but then your decision in life, pull the trigger. So like one of my mentors told me, it was like a huge aha moment for me when I kept injuring my back. I was totally just doing it to myself. And after he already instructed me on what to do, we fixed it. I kept repeating the same problems. And I brought it up to him one time, and he's like, well, at this point, um, you're doing it to yourself,
Oh,
and
really?
you can stop anytime.
Yeah.
And it was one of those aha moments, He's like,
Sure.
he's right. I am doing it to myself, and I could stop anytime. The power is all mine. And it's the same thing with you guys struggling for metabolic health issues. Don't buy this BS that your weight challenges are due to your genetics or age. Metabolism doesn't even change from your mid-20s all the way through your mid-60s. And in fact, if
Really?
you just keep increasing your muscle mass through training properly, it actually improves, it increases as you
Yeah.
age. So you guys, don't buy into this. Don't buy into these quick fixes like bullshit propaganda nonsense. It doesn't work. Just look at people that are on the most medical drugs. They look and feel the worst. You think it would be the opposite if this stuff was working, Use
Oh,
your
sure.
critical eye. Stop looking for a daddy figure to give you all the answers because they wear a white coat and a name tag. It's silly. It's not working. And again,
That's
Americans are
That's a very good way to put it. I think everyone in America wants to outsource their health to somebody else.
Yeah, and it would be nice if there were healthy professionals, but
Yeah.
pretty much 9 out of 10 of our health professionals are extremely mentally and physically unwell themselves. And what kind of information are you going to get from these people?
Well, I think I can't remember if it's Casey Means is I can't remember. Oh, she's been nominated for Surgeon General, and her brother Callie, he is a White House advisor. And I think they have a book. I can't remember the name. Good Energy, but I'll just say she said the statement that she makes repeatedly is only like 1 to 3 hours of training on nutrition in medical school, which is kind of appalling. But I'll just say I want to for solutions, and just so people can understand where to find solutions, I want to recommend this. This is it's a documentary. I think it came out last year. It's called Hack Your Health: The Secrets of Your Gut. It's really fascinating. It's on Netflix. If you have a chance, you can watch it. And I really think I wrote a review of it last year. I think it's one of the best documentaries about gut health. They take 4 different human beings and follow them, 4 or 5 people. They follow them for what their health problems are, and then they test their gut microbiome. And they say, like, it's just really a fascinating movie that really breaks down a complex scientific idea into a very understandable, very digestible format. So, Hack Your Health: The Secrets of Your Gut. Anyway, it's on Netflix. And they said, it says 88, in my review, I said 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. So I don't know where I got that statistic.
From my book.
It's rounded up. It's rounded up pretty regularly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dave, it's great to see you again. Let's do another podcast in like a few months. It's always good to catch up with you. And yeah, thanks for staying in touch all these years too. I really appreciate you and what you're doing. It's tough work.
Likewise.
Going against the tide of the big ocean, but someone's got to do it because these poor, like you mentioned, I actually like this country a tremendous amount. I lived in Eastern Europe for a long time and throughout the rest of the world.
Sure.
And I still think it has so much potential and so many great things. But we just got to change these basic fundamental things that are kind of breaking the country apart, kind of getting rid of this mind virus that normalizes obesity, misery, medical drug dependence, and disease, and call out these companies and these medical professionals, these drug dealers for keeping that system alive. Come on, you guys, it's not helping anyone. It's just lining the pockets of a few very small minority of people at the expense of just normalized illness for everyone else. And it's just sad to see because I know they're hardworking people and they love their families and stuff like that. And these things at the end of the day are not complicated. Once you know, the solution is quite easy. But once you take out all of these obstacles of sabotage and corporate propaganda and just the normalization of these nasty medical drugs, instead of getting to the root cause of just really just making people happy and healthy again, and then they won't need any of these medical drugs, stuff of that sort. But I wish you guys the best. I'll include Dave's information if you guys want to follow his accounts and everything below. And if you guys have any questions, just always feel free to reach out, okay? And ask those critical questions, like I mentioned. Don't just kind of blindly follow sick health professionals and then expect to get good information from them because you won't. And that's how it's going to be, okay? So wishing everyone the best, and have a good weekend, everyone.
Thanks so much, Eugene. Great to see you again. Have
You
a
too,
great
Dave.
weekend.
Keep
Take
up the
care.
good work. Bye.
Likewise.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you've ever had trouble losing weight, or you've lost weight, but still didn't have the ideal body or health you're aiming for, please feel free to reach out anytime and book an assessment. Eugene will work with you to cover your goals in detail, see what's holding you back, and go from there. In the meantime, feel free to check out the countless testimonials on Eugene's website in the link below. In the testimonial section, you'll notice everyone has various backgrounds, are of all different ages, and all have had different challenges in their life, but they all have one thing in common: they were all able to find their health and achieve their ideal body. You're also welcome to add yourself to the Facebook group in the link below. There you'll have access to the live videos that Eugene does weekly on Sundays, and other helpful content. Thank you again for tuning in.